Good morning and warm welcome. Second day of the online webinar. Respected faculty of the session, Dr. Advocate CA Avinash Poddar, Regional Council Member CA Manish Gadia, WRC Chairperson CA Varsha Deshpande, Vikasa Chairman Goa CA Gaurav Kenkre, and immediate past Chairman CA Ullas Dumaskar. Good morning and warm welcome to all of you for the second day and third technical session on GST assessment and adjudication with special focus on analysis of Showcause Notice. Now I request Chairperson of Goa Branch, Varsha Deshpande, to address the gathering. Over to you, Madam.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Respected faculty for today, Dr. Advocate CA Avinash Poddar ji, Regional Council Member CA Manish Gadia, my Managing Committee colleague, immediate past Chairman Sri Ullas Dumaskar, Secretary Thomas Andrar, and Vikasa Chairman Gaurav Kekre, all seniors in the profession and all the participants. A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all on the second day of the two-day sub-regional conference of WRC hosted by Goa. Yesterday, we had a very interactive session with CA Dr. Girish Ahuja, where our members could refer to many queries and get the clarifications. We also had a very enlightening session on auditing standards of SMPs by CA Niranjan Joshi and CA Dhananjay Gokhale. It was a brainstorming sessions throughout the day, but it is heartening to note that there was very good attendance and the members were there till the end of the day. Today, in continuation of the same, we shall be having deliberation on assessment and adjudication with special focus on analysis of Showcause Notice of GST by eminent faculty Dr. Advocate CA Avinash Poddar. GST provisions have been continuously changing. Now it is expected that the government will put emphasis on compliances of GST Act, and the SSS may get a number of notices of default and penal actions from the department in near future. SSS as well as professionals should therefore be very well armed with the remedies for the unreasonable actions of the government. I am sure today's faculty will throw light on all these aspects. Before I hand over the mic to Thomas, I want to thank a very, very big thank you to all the members and the participants for their overwhelming response for this conference. It was beyond our expectation. This will certainly motivate us to do better programs in future. Also, I want to thank all the managing committee members for their tireless efforts to make this sub-regional conference a success. Thank you and wish you all happy learning. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Madam. Now I request Regional Council Member CA Manish Gadia to give his opening remark. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Thomas sir, for giving these opportunities. Dignitaries on the dais, especially my dear friend, Dr. Advocate CA Avinash Poddar. If I list down the degrees, whatever he is holding, it will take another 10-15 minutes for me to complete. But really, he is a good person, down to earth, very learned person. And I also compliment Goa branch for taking this initiative and holding this sub-regional conference and putting so much effort for registration and everything in such a short span of time. So I think this will be the highest registration what we have got this time for the sub-regional conference at Goa. All credit goes to all the managing committee members of Goa. So thank you very much for all that efforts. As far as GST is concerned, it has started since July 2017, and almost we have seen 3.5 years. And in 3.5 years, as Madam has rightly said, the changes are the only constant thing as far as GST is concerned. Every night at 9 o'clock, we have to check to the site कि कुछ नया तो नहीं आ गया है. That what we are facing, and that is the actual situation. The way the law has been drafted, many times we have discussed that what many members call me and say, sir, what should be the practice area as far as the GST is concerned? So before implementation, I used to say the compliance. Now after implementation, when the final law came, now I am saying the main area of practice as far as GST is concerned is the litigation. That is the adjudication, appeal, etc. will be the main thrust of this practice. The way the law has been structured, drafted, various loose ends are there. I should not use this word, but this is the fact. And because of that, we are going to see the lot of show cause notices in future. We all know that during this corona period, also there was a complete lockdown, and unlock started in the month of June to 2020. And I have observed that at least in the city of Mumbai, the search itself also started in the month of June 2020. So the day unlock started, search also started. And I think Avinash sir has also experienced the same thing. And today we have to guide us on this topic, CA Avinash Poddar sir. He is practicing as an advocate. And if you see various case laws as far as the GST is concerned, even within a span of 3 years, various landmark judgments are to his credit. So definitely, I am hopeful that Avinash sir is going to guide us on this topic and put a foundation for members to encourage into a practice of litigation from the compliance. So thank you very much. Wish you all a happy learning. Over to you, Thomas sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your opening remark. Now I request Vikasa Chairman Gaurav Kenkre to introduce the faculty of the day, Dr. Advocate C. Avinash Poddar.
Thank you so much. A very warm good morning to all the participants and all the dignitaries present today. It's my very pleasant task to introduce Dr. Advocate C. Avinash Poddar. As you can see from his background and as what C.A. Manish Gadia sir has said, there are too many degrees for me to elaborate here today. I will try to be as brief as possible. He has over 20 years experience as a practicing professional. Out of those 20 years, for 17 years, he was practicing as a CA. In the last 3 years, he has been practicing as an advocate in the field of indirect taxes, commercial laws, and also cybercrime. He is based at Ahmedabad and Surat and has branches and associates all over India. He, some of his qualifications, if I may just run through, he has an insolvency professional degree. He is a DISA. He has also completed various certificate courses such as arbitration, forensic audit, fraud detection, indirect taxes, etc. He has appeared before various courts, including the Supreme Court of India and various high courts. I think if his introduction would be incomplete if I do not mention the landmark judgment by the Gujarat High Court in the case of AAP and Co, where Sir managed to managed to enforce the government of India to bring a retrospective amendment to the GST law to give some kind of sanctity to the GSTR 3B. I think that the chapter is still not over. I don't think Sir will let go of that so soon, but let us see what is there in future for us. And he is a special invitee to the GST and the Indirect Tax Committee of ICAI regularly. He is a member of the Indirect Tax Committee of the PhD Chamber of Commerce of WIRC, and he has written several books. He has delivered over 750 lectures, and some of his more prominent books, if I may just point out, are the Master Guide to the GST Act, Compendium on Critical Issues in GST, Master Guide to GST Rules, Landmark Judgment under GST, etc. So I think today I would really thank Avinash sir, because when I called him to seek his permission for taking him on board for his sub-regional, instantly he said yes. He had no reservation, nothing. He said, yes, I'm there. You go ahead. So thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time for us. And I hope our audience will be enthralled by your fantastic lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaurav. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So at the outset, I would like to thank Goa branch and WRC for giving me this opportunity. And it is indeed a great opportunity for me to address the participants from Goa. Goa being one of the cities wherein we always used to spend our Diwali vacations, but unfortunately this year we could not visit there. Nevertheless, the topic which is given to me today is a very interesting topic and a very, I would say, a topic which is very close to my heart, because from there the journey of litigation begins. And as rightly mentioned by Manish ji, that GST will be full of litigations unless the government comes out, do some proactive actions and try to reduce the litigations, and not only try to reduce the litigations by changing or amending the laws, but also by way of training their employees or training the departmental officers. Because something which I would like to put on record here officially is, unless the officers are trained, unless those stakeholders who are going to implement GST, who are going to, what I can say, follow GST or comply GST, unless those people are trained, it includes we professionals also, it includes the departmental officers also, and also it includes the members of GST Council. Unless all those persons are made aware what are the implications, what are the repercussions of such a law, the litigation is not going to stop. And therefore, in order to reduce the litigation, we are supposed to be trained, we are supposed to be well versed, we are supposed to be in sync with what departmental officers or the government is looking forward and what we professionals are expected to do. And therefore, unless we are in sync, I don't think that the litigation is going to stop. Anyways, we'll have to deal with the current situation, and the current situation, as rightly, again I would say, as rightly mentioned by Manish ji, is very, very bad. They have started a drive. I would like to mention here that they have started a drive of arresting people. You will, I think Manish ji will also agree to this, Gaurav ji will agree to this, and rest of the experts and the dignitaries available and present today will agree to this, that they have started a drive of arresting people. I would like to, before beginning and before starting my subject, I would like to mention one thing. Rather, I would like to share one thing, a recent arrest in Gujarat. See, there is a provision under section 132 which says that if you are doing an offense, and these are the listed offenses, if you are indulged into any of these offenses, then it becomes a cognizable and non-bailable offense, provided the value exceeds a particular amount. It nowhere includes an interpretation issue. Manish, specifically I am sharing with all of us, including you, because this is something which is very alarming, and we being the part of the office bearers of WRC and the ICI, we need to address this issue, because this issue is going to have very grave impact on not only on the trade but also on the professionals. You might have read 3 chartered accountants are arrested yesterday. So this is giving a very bad impression. Anyways, coming back to the case which I was trying to share. Now, section 132 subsection 1 lists down certain things, that you have issued invoices but not sold the goods. You have taken credit because of that. All those stuffs are being included in clause A, B, C, and D. And clause A, B, and C, and D are taken into cognizance under section 69 for giving the power to arrest. Nowhere it includes the interpretation issue. Now, there is a very important interpretation issue, and this needs to be addressed. Interpretation issue is whether it is exempted or whether something is taxable. Now, I have a bona fide belief that this is exempted. I have not collected even a single rupee as tax. I have not issued any taxable invoice. I have not collected even a single rupee as tax. Now, what the department is doing, department is contending that no, you are not falling within the exemption limits, and this interpretation issue pertains to the trade name or the what I can say, trademark related issue for packed atta, besan, or such kind of products, which are covered in 2/2017, 1/2017, read with 27/2017. So now the question is, in line with how the adjudication or how the assessment proceedings are going to go and look the future, now department has contended that he has a turnover of 300 crores. The person whom I'm referring to has a turnover of 300 crores. His tax liability is certainly there. He is not covered in the exemption limit, irrespective of the fact whether he has collected any amount or not. His liability comes to around 13 crores at the rate of 5%. He has not claimed even a single rupee as an input tax credit, but then also he is supposed to be arrested. And you will not believe he was arrested. And unfortunately, looking to the current situation and the courts and the belief of the courts, till session court he has appeared and he has not got the bail. Now, if this will happen, just imagine, Manishji, we are into practicing field, we are advising. Now we read the circulars, we read the trade notices, we read the notifications, and we advise our clients that yes, if you comply with these conditions, then certainly you are not taxable. You are falling outside the limit of tax. So this is something which relates to interpretation. You cannot say that I am indulged into evasion of tax or I am indulged into the leakage or fraud. So therefore, this cannot be a reason for arrest. But they have arrested. And unfortunately, there is a judgment, Vimal Goswami versus State of Gujarat. It has been pronounced recently by the Honorable Gujarat High Court, wherein they have clearly deliberated on this issue, that whether an arrest can happen prior to adjudication. This is a big problem, because after entering into my subject, I'll not be in a position to deal with the subject because I have not given the topic. I'm not having the topic of how to arrest. But the judgment, which I will recommend all the participants of this particular conference to read, that it's a 176-page judgment of Honorable Gujarat High Court. If required, I'll be sharing with Gauravji. He will share with all of you. Now that judgment clearly lays down the principle that yes, the arrest can happen. It is a preventive measure, and therefore the arrest can happen prior to adjudication. There is no bar on that. You are following a judgment of Make My Trip, but that was having a different footing altogether. If you are indulged into the evasion, and the commissioner is of the reason to believe. Now the point is reason to believe. That is something which is very important, and he needs to prove that. So what department will do? Department will simply read only one thing. They will read only one thing. Kya मैं adjudication से पहले arrest कर सकता हूँ? He will read that and he will start arresting. But they will not go into the guidelines which has been given by the court. Court has given clear guidelines when you can arrest and how you can arrest, but they will never do that. So this is a matter of representation, but at the same time, this will lead to a lot of litigation, lot of adjudication issues, because now the person is arrested, his assessment, adjudication, and every process will begin from there. And unfortunately, there are a number of judgments of various courts which clearly lays down, like you all are aware, under section 129, section 130, they are laying the penalties, and the courts are releasing the goods, but at the same time they are also directing the petitioner that kindly get your goods released as per our order, but go and get the adjudication done. If you are not satisfied, file an appeal under 107. If again you are not satisfied, file an appeal under 112. Now where to file under appeal under 112, I don't know, because the tribunals are still not there. After the inception and implementation of GST law of more than 40 months, the GST tribunal is not there, and which is the most unfortunate part. आप किसी भी चीज को कितना भी रिपेयर करेंगे ना, तो पैचेस तो दिखेंगे. The same thing has happened in the returns also. They have came out with IFF, they have came out with the quarterly scheme. All those are patch works. Anyways, not going into all those issues, I just wanted to start with something in line with what Manishji has shared, that yes, the future of GST is certainly into litigations. But as a practicing advocate or a practicing chartered accountant, I would simply would like to mention one thing, that litigations are appreciated when those are on point of law. It is never appreciated when those litigations are merely to waste the time of the court. Because nowadays, whatever litigations are coming, most of the litigations are because of the procedural issues. You might have not claimed Tran 1 credit. You might not be in a position to claim the input tax credit in your returns. You are not in a position to revise your returns. What are these? These are not the question of law. These are the points of facts which I believe should not be litigated. These points, these procedural issues should be clarified and settled by the department itself, so that there are no issues pertaining to that. And if there are any question of law, if there are any interpretational issues, then certainly yes, I would recommend that the litigation will be there. So now allow me to begin the topic which is allotted to me, assessment and adjudication under GST. And I've been requested to throw more emphasis and to focus more on how to read and how to analyze the Showcause notice. So let us move ahead, and then gradually we'll be discussing. And Gauravji has shared some issues with me, and he wanted me to cover those issues in my deliberation. I would certainly like to cover those issues also, and then we'll take up the question and answers at the end, so that whatever issues are not covered are at least addressed by me. It will be my pleasure. So these are the two topics which we'll be covering today: assessment and adjudication. Assessment. Now, when I talk about assessment, I think all our fellow friends, all chartered accountants, all practicing professionals are well versed with the term assessment. What is assessment all about? Assessment is nothing, as per me. This is my definition. Maybe it is not within the four corners of law, but I believe when you assess your tax liability, when you assess your taxability and pay the tax accordingly, it becomes self-assessment. Now, the section 59 of the CGST Act provides for self-assessment. Now, before deliberating on this, let me be very clear with all of you. We all are clear anyways, because we are dealing day in, day out with the taxation laws, more specifically the income tax law. Friends, income tax also is a self-assessment tax regime. Similarly, GST also is a self-assessment based tax regime. Now, what is self-assessment is, you do your business, understand the law, find out your taxability or exemption, calculate your tax liabilities according to the law, and pay the tax. That is what is self-assessment. Plus, as per me, the self-assessment also includes a trust entrusted on all the taxpayers. I'm repeating, self-assessment based tax regime can be simply defined as a trust which is entrusted on the taxpayers by the government. The government believes and keeps the trust and faith on the taxpayer that whatever he will calculate, whatever he will determine as his tax liability will be the correct tax liability. So this is what is self-assessment. Anyways, the law says every registered taxable person shall himself assess the tax payable under this act and furnish a return for each tax period as specified under section 39. Now I would like to emphasize only on one thing. We are reading section 39. Gauravji has mentioned about the judgment of AAP and company, wherein we have challenged that GSTR 3B is not a return, and the Honorable Gujarat High Court have let down the principle that yes, it is not a return. The matter is before the Honorable Supreme Court, and yes, as rightly mentioned by Gauravji, I'm not going to let it go as it is, even though they have amended the law retrospectively. But I am of the belief that the retrospective amendment cannot happen to cause loss or hardship to the taxpayer, and therefore this retrospective amendment needs to be struck down and it needs to be made prospective. Anyways, we'll look into that. But yes, once you assess your liability, pay the same, and then you file your return under section 39, that becomes self-assessment. Now there is a question in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. Now this is a question which I would like to pose before all of you. Whether it is really a self-assessment based taxation. See friends, kindly try to remember what I shared. I shared in my own words that self-assessment is nothing but a regime wherein the government of India places a trust on all the taxpayers that whatever liability they are computing is correct, and therefore self-assessment is a trust-based regime. But whether it is true in indirect tax, in GST, as per me the answer is no. I'm repeating. See, being a practicing lawyer or being a person into practice for more than 20 years, I might be like harsh or very tough in my words at times. But the fact is, I am of a strong belief that GST, although they are claiming it to be a self-assessment based taxation regime, it is not a self-assessment based taxation regime. Why I'm saying so? Because if you trust someone, you will have to trust him fully. You cannot have partial trust on him. You'll have to trust fully. And then out of thousands of taxpayers or lakhs of taxpayers or crores of taxpayers, you need to pick few of the taxpayers for evaluation and understanding as a random check whether they have calculated correctly or not, or whether there is any interpretational issues or not. If you select 90% of those taxpayers, you cannot say that it is a self-assessment based tax regime, because as soon as you will file your return, it will go into, there are multiple situations, there are multiple provisions in the law. It will go into scrutiny of returns. It may ask for an audit to be done by a tax departmental officer. Whatever is being done for cross-checking of whatever details you have filed, to my belief, it loses or it makes you lose the impact of the word self-assessment. And therefore, I'm of a strong belief that GST also is not a taxation regime which is a self-assessment based tax regime. Plus, let me add one thing. When you compare with income tax, how many or what is the percentage of the scrutinies that they are coming out with? The same is not going to be in the case of GST. They will try to scrutinize by one way or the other 100% of the taxpayers. That just go back and look into the service tax regime. Once GST was implemented, in this last 3 years, they have done audit of almost all the taxpayers. So they have the clear intention of evaluating, examining whatever are being filed, whatever details or documents are being filed by the taxpayers. And once they are satisfied, then only they will give the reports. Till that time, you cannot say that they have relied upon you. You cannot say that whatever returns you have filed is the final assessment order. No, they have the time limit of 5 years or 3 years. They can come out with the adjudication at any point in time, either by way of audit by the departmental officer, special audit by a chartered accountant or cost accountant, scrutiny of returns, search and seizure or inspection. They have ways and means of entering into your books and evaluating or examining whatever you have filed is filed correctly or not. So therefore, I am of a strong belief that this is not at all a self-assessment based tax regime for majority of the taxpayers. Maybe I am wrong, but this is my belief. Next slide, please. Now, next part of assessment is provisional assessment. Friends, I have time till 12:50, I believe. It's almost 2 hours from now. What I will try to do is I'll try to complete the assessment part by 11, and then for 1.5 hours or maybe 1 hour 40 minutes, we'll have a detailed discussion on the adjudication proceedings. Appeal is not the part of discussion today, so I'll not be dealing into that, but I'll try to touch upon wherever it is required. Now, section 60, provisional assessment. So what is provisional assessment? Again, I would not look into the slide. I'll not deal with the law, because you all are aware about the law. You can read the act and you can be very well acquainted with that. I would simply mention here what is provisional assessment and what is the fundamental of provisional assessment. And I equate provisional assessment as an option to advance rulings. Why I am saying so? Let me share that. What is advance ruling? Advance ruling is when you have a doubt, regarding the taxability, regarding the classification, regarding the applicability of a notification, regarding the availability of input tax credit. In all those cases, you can approach the authority, which is known as advance ruling authority. You can file an application before them, and on the basis of that application and your arguments, they will reach to a conclusion and they will pronounce in a ruling wherein they will say whether it is taxable or not, whether it is to be classified as you want or not, whether input tax credit is available to you or not, whether this is exempt or whether this notification is applicable to you or not. So all those questions which you had in mind will be clarified by the advance ruling authority. Similarly, I would say there is a provision of provisional assessment also. When a person who is a taxable person or a registered person, a person is not able to determine the value of goods on which the tax is to be paid, or who is not able to determine the rate of tax which is applicable to those supplies, then in that case he may approach the proper officer. He may approach the proper officer in writing, and he can ask to get himself provisionally assessed. To be very honest, it is nothing but a part payment of tax or an advance payment of tax, because he will apply for provisional assessment and the officer will say that yes, this is how you need to be assessed finally, and therefore this is your liability, this is the rate of tax which is applicable to you, and the person pays accordingly. And finally, when the final assessment will happen, if there is any difference, then he will have to pay that along with interest. If there is no difference, then in that case nothing will be there, and in case he has paid extra, then he will be eligible for claim of the refund of whatever has been paid extra. This is the provisional assessment concept. So once again, I would like to reiterate, let us go through the provision also. It says where taxable person is unable to determine the value of goods or services, or both, to determine the rate of tax or to determine the rate of tax applicable thereto, request may be made to the proper officer in writing, given reasons for the payment of tax on provisional basis. So you will make a request to the proper officer, and the proper officer may allow at such rate or on such value as may be specified by him by way of an order within 90 days from the date of receipt of such request. So I'm not dealing with the procedural part, and therefore I'm not dealing with any of the days concept. That very well we all are learned and we all can deal with it. The only thing which as a responsibility is casted on me by the Goa branch and WRC, I would like to deliberate and I like to share my views on all those aspects. So for such allowance, execution of bond is prescribed with such surety and or security as the proper officer may deem fit. He may announce that you are supposed to pay this much, you are supposed to give or offer a bond and a security of this much. This is required for binding taxable person for payment of difference at the time of final assessment. Those securities are required for that purpose, for securing the revenue. The proper officer shall pass the final assessment order within 6 months from the date of the communication of the provisional order, after taking into account such information as may be required for finalizing the assessment. Next slide, please. Yes. So this is just an extension of that section only, that whatever is the time limit given to him, within that time limit he will have to give an order of final assessment. That period can be further extended to 6 months by JC and ADC, additional commissioner or joint commissioner, and if it is to be extended by commissioner, then it can be extended to 4 years also. And the person will be liable to pay interest for any short payments, and in case he has paid extra, then he will be liable for refund. So that is all about provisional assessment. And believe me friends, provisional assessment is something which is absolutely different from best judgment assessment. We'll look into best judgment assessment also in section 62 and 63. Just give me some time. I'll go into best judgment assessment, and then we'll try to relate the provisional assessment and the best judgment assessment. And therefore I'm equating this provisional assessment with the advanced ruling, because it cannot be without application of mind, it cannot be without understanding the facts, it cannot be without understanding the position of law, that a provisional assessment can be given. A provisional assessment has to be given after considering every aspect of such taxpayer and the supply which is being made by him. It cannot be merely on the basis of a guess or the willfulness of the tax authority. Yeah, next. I'm sorry, I'm causing a lot of trouble to the person. I think Gauravji is operating this. I'm really sorry for such inconvenience, but unfortunately my laptop was not working, and therefore I have connected through iPad, and because of this I was not having the file available with me. Section 61, it deals with scrutiny of returns. Now scrutiny is a term which we all are well versed. Income tax, day in day out we are dealing with scrutinies, but look the probability and look the numbers which are coming for scrutiny in income tax. But in GST, I am damn sure, although the scrutinies they have not started, but I am very sure that they will, once they start the scrutiny of returns, they will try to cover everyone. And this is what they are doing since years. Recently, I have found one notice wherein I have seen that you have paid 80% out of your input tax credit. 20% only is paid out of electronic cash ledger. Kindly clarify. These kind of notices now they are sending. They have sent, in last 3 months you have paid X amount of tax, but in last 2 months you have not paid even 40% of that tax liability. Now what is that kind of notice? It is mere wastage of time, because if you want to evaluate or examine such kind of things, you can simply ask the person, you can simply scrutinize the return. So therefore I am of a belief that since the power of scrutiny is given to them, they will try to scrutinize everything. The law says the proper officer may scrutinize the return and the related particulars furnished by taxable person to verify the correctness of the return. So that is the purpose. The purpose is to verify the correctness of the return. Can you relate this with the term audit which is there? Clause 13 of section 2 of the CGST Act deals with the definition of audit. And the audit definition also includes the similar terms to verify the correctness. So therefore, if you are not allotted for the audit under section 65, then you will be dragged into the scrutiny of returns, or vice versa may happen. Or rather, I am of the belief both will happen. They will also scrutinize your return and they will also allot your case for auditing. So his purpose is to verify the correctness. In case he finds any discrepancy in the same, he will let you know the discrepancy. He will give you some time to correct that discrepancy. Once you correct that online, he will again go into that. If he is satisfied, he will drop the proceedings. If he is not satisfied, then he may drag the proceedings further and he may issue the show cause notice under section 73 or 74. He may initiate the inspection or search proceedings under section 67, and therefore it is very clearly mentioned in the law itself, the last limb I am reading, in case discrepancy is accepted by the taxable person, not corrected in the return of the month when accepted, appropriate action may be initiated by the proper officer, including under section 65, that is audit, under section 66, that is special audit, under section 67, that is inspection or search, or determine the tax and other dues under section 73 or 74. Now you all can understand what kind of power has been given to them. Simply a scrutiny of return. He is sending you a discrepancy notice. You are replying back to the discrepancy notice. He is saying whatever discrepancy is found, kindly correct that discrepancy in the same month in which the discrepancy is found and accepted. If it is not done, then they can initiate any of these actions, and they are saying appropriate action. And you all are aware I am not the right person to say, because I will say it bluntly. So I am not the right person to say, but you all will agree and you will all will appreciate that when such kind of powers have been given or are given to the officer, how they will use that power. Anyways, next slide please. Yes. Now this is what is best judgment assessment. We all are aware when a best judgment assessment can happen. Even in GST, even the law prior to GST, all were having the powers of best judgment assessment. The income tax also has that power. Generally, I have found that whenever a registered person fails to furnish a return, best judgment assessment may happen. So the same is there in GST law also under section 62. It says where return which was supposed to be filed under section 39 or section 45 is not filed even after the service of notice under section 46. This is very, very important, friends. Please bear in mind, this is most important, because generally the tax officer fails here, and I have seen, argued and noted multiple judgments by the Honorable Gujarat High Court wherein there was no action initiated under section 46, no notice was given under section 46. Directly they have invoked section 62, which is absolutely bad in law, because it clearly says even after the service of notice, meaning thereby first and foremost the responsibility of the tax officer is to send a notice under section 46 for non-filing of return. Once you do not comply with that notice, you fail to furnish return even after this, the receipt of such notice under section 46, then only the best judgment assessment may happen. So this is a very, very important thing to be kept in mind, that unless he issues a notice to you, he gives an opportunity of filing the returns under section 46, you cannot be made assessed under section 62 by the tax officer. And therefore further it is said the proper officer may proceed to the best of his judgment and assess the tax liability. Such assessment must be on the basis of material or the gathered material. This is again very, very important. There are n number of judgments under income tax, under service tax, wherein it is clearly laid down that best judgment assessment cannot happen on the basis of wild guess. It cannot happen on the basis of wild guess. It has to be on the basis of proper evidence, on the basis of sufficient information. You cannot just calculate your tax liability or calculate the tax liability of any taxpayer on the basis of your whims and fancies. You will have to look into the facts and circumstances. You will have to look into the actual facts, actual figures, and then you need to calculate. And therefore it is said in the law itself that such assessment must be on the basis of material which is available, like 2A, GSTR 1, or the credits which is taken by your recipients. You need to merge all those figures, or you need to gather the material and then make that material as an evidence, and accordingly you are supposed to do the best judgment order. Such assessment order must be issued within a period of 5 years from the date specified under section 44, the filing of annual return. Those dates are applicable here also. In case valid return is filed within 30 days, now this is something which is good also, and at the same time which is very, very odd or awkward. See, you have been given an opportunity under section 46. I think the time which generally they gives is 15 days. You are asked to furnish your return which is not furnished till date in next 15 days or 15 days of the receipt of such notice under section 46. You fail to do that. Now whatever materials are there available with the officer, he assess your liability on the basis of that material under section 62. Now even after that assessment, an opportunity has been given to the taxpayer, and now they are saying that if within 30 days of the receipt of such best judgment order under section 62, if you file the returns, if you file the valid returns and within 30 days of service of such order, then that order will be withdrawn. So this is again a liberty, again a privilege which is given to the taxpayer. So this is, as per me, this is a very welcome move by the lawmakers, that again an opportunity, because it may happen that you might have not received the notice under section 46 and therefore section 62 was initiated and the best judgment order was passed. As soon as you come to know about the best judgment order, you have the liberty, you have another opportunity to approach the authority to file the returns within 30 days and approach the authority, and then the order of best judgment will be withdrawn. Then they can start with this assessment proceedings altogether, a fresh one, but at least for the time being you will be safe and sound. Yes, next slide please. Now section 62 was dealing with the registered persons. Section 63 is dealing with unregistered persons. Now the person may be unregistered on two fronts. One, he was supposed to be registered but he has not taken registration, number one. Number two, he was registered but because of the provisions of section 29 subsection 2, there are 5 clauses. You have taken voluntary registration but have not commenced business. You have not filed returns for 6 months. You have not filed returns for 2 quarters, 3 subsequent quarters. So if you are falling in any of those circumstances, you have been sent a notice by the authorities, and then also you have not filed the returns or you have not complied with it, and therefore the registration has been cancelled by the authorities under section 29 subsection 2. Then you become an unregistered person. So therefore, where a taxable person fails to obtain registration even though he is liable to do so, or whose registration has been cancelled under section 29 subsection 2 but who was liable to pay tax, in both these cases the authorities are empowered, the proper officer is empowered to do the assessment on the basis of their judgment, which needs to be on the basis of certain material which is available, because that principle will lie in all the circumstances. You cannot assess anyone on the basis of wild guess. It has to be on the basis of proper evidences and documents and the material or information which is available to you or which you have gathered. So the proper officer, he may proceed to assess the tax liability of such taxable person who has not taken registration or whose registration was cancelled for the relevant tax periods, and then within the period of 5 years he needs to issue the assessment order. At last it is said such assessment order shall not be passed without giving an opportunity, that is, showcause notice for passing such order is mandatory, and reasonable opportunity of being heard has to be given. Therefore, it can be said that for an unregistered person, if the assessment has to happen under section 63, a showcause notice is mandatorily required to be issued and an opportunity of being heard is supposed to be given to him. Therefore, it could be concluded that the principles of natural justice must be followed for assessing any person who is an unregistered person. Maybe his assessment is required because he was liable to be registered but he has not taken registration, or his registration was cancelled because he was falling in any of the clauses of section 29 subsection 2. Yes, next slide please. Now this is the last section for assessments. It says summary assessment. I would say this section is not followed by the tax officers frequently, but this section has a huge impact. This is my belief, because this has been, or this section gives wide power to the officer, and it says that if you want to protect your revenue, and you are of the view that such revenue will become difficult or the person is going to abscond or run away, then in that case you can make an application to a superior authority, get the clearance for the summary assessment, and you are eligible to do the summary assessment before the completion of year itself. And therefore this section has a wide impact as per me. Although the departmental authorities have not yet used the provision of section 64 oftenly, but this section can certainly be used in all those cases where they want to use section 83. What is section 83? I'll try to deal with that in today's deliberation. Now it says, in order to protect the interest of revenue, whenever these words are written, I'm sorry to use those words, but whenever such kind of words are written in the law, it is always in favor of the authority. Always. Because he will always take shelter of these words. He will say that I have conducted such an act for the purpose of protection of revenue. Now, how to protect that revenue, or how he has taken the belief, or what was the belief before taking such action, that he is taking such action in order to protect the revenue? No answer to that. But yes, these words, when written in any of these statutes, is generally taken in their favor by the authorities. In order to protect the interest of revenue, the proper officer having evidence of outstanding liability may, with prior permission of ADC or JC, additional commissioner or joint commissioner, proceed to assess the tax liability and issue the assessment order, provided he has reasons to believe that any delay will adversely affect the interest of revenue. Now there can be hours and hours of discussion which I can do only on the term reasons to believe, and there has been lot of hours invested by the honorable courts, maybe by high courts, maybe by honorable Supreme Court, wherein the term reasons to believe has been interpreted and guidelines have been given or pronounced by those courts. But to put it and to keep it simple, I would say reasons to believe must be unbiased. It must be unbiased by the authority. If he has strong reasons to believe, it has to be recorded in writing. It has to be recorded in writing. It cannot be wild belief. It has to be properly recorded. Yes, these are the reasons on which I believe. These are the circumstances. These are the facts, and these are the situations which make me believe that this person may run away. this person may be declared insolvent. The recovery of tax from this person may become difficult in times to come. When you have strong reason to believe, then yes, you can use this power. You can make an application, make a representation to the ADC or JC, take his prior permission, and issue the assessment order, which is summary assessment, in all those cases in order to protect the revenue. But the most important aspect and point is you must have a very strong reason to believe that any delay in making such assessment may cause a loss to revenue. Further, it is said, in a situation where the person to whom the liability is not ascertainable and the liability is of supply of goods, the person in charge of such goods would become liable for payment of tax and other amount of. See, what may happen is, if I am willing to abscond, what I will do, I will supply my goods to some X person and I'll abscond. So they have given a wide power to the authority that if I run away, then the person who is in charge of those goods, they can recover the amount of tax or any other amount from that person also. If the taxable person make an application within 30 days from the date of receipt of the aforesaid order, he may withdraw such order. That liberty is again given. If ADC or JC considers the above order as erroneous, he may withdraw such order. And after withdrawal, in both the cases, the proper officer shall follow the procedure laid down in section 73 or 74, which we'll try to discuss and deliberate today in the subsequent part of our discussion. So this was all about section 64. Next slide, please. So up till now, what we have done is we have tried to discuss the assessment provisions which have been given from section 59 to section 64. Section 59 dealt with self-assessment, section 60 dealt with provisional assessment, section 61, again a wide power has been given to the authorities. Section 61 deals with the scrutiny of returns, section 62 deals with the assessment of the persons who have not filed their returns. Means a registered person who failed to file the returns and best judgment assessment under section 62. Section 63, which dealt with the assessment of unregistered persons. Section 64, which dealt with the summary assessment. So this is all about the assessment part. Now let me come to the adjudication process. But friends, before starting the deliberation of on adjudication aspect, let me tell you 2-3 things which are mandatory or which are very important to understand the adjudication part of the what I can say, the GST provisions, or rather it was also applicable in service tax, excise, or whatever taxation laws we are reading or dealing with. Now, what is adjudication? Adjudication, as per me, is issuance of an order determining your tax liability, appropriating the tax that you have already paid, asking for the balance, if any, to be paid, imposing of compensatory interest, and also imposition of penalty wherever applicable. This is all about adjudication. Now, but there is a process of adjudication. Adjudication cannot and may not happen without the following of that particular procedure. That procedure may not be well defined in the law, but over the period of time, that procedure is well settled in the law. Now, when I say well settled in the law, what does it mean? I mean that the principle of natural justice is an established principle and a constitutional right, I would say. It's an established principle. It is a right of a person against whom any decision is being taken. You might have read, all of you might have read multiple times that whenever some decision is causing a loss or a decision is taken in such a way that it is being detrimental to a taxpayer, he always have the right of being heard. And this is nothing but the adjudication process. Meaning thereby, what is being done by you? You are doing a business, you know your activity, you have determined the tax applicability on that activity. If you find that those activities are taxable under GST law, you collect the tax, and then thereafter you make the payment of those tax liabilities. And once you make the payment, you file a return under section 39. This is the entire process. Now thereafter, the role of department comes. Your return is filed. It means you are self-assessed now. Section 59 का compliance हो गया. Now the department will start assessment under section 62, 63, 61, or 73, 74, or 67. Now, how that has to be done, that is something which is very important, and I would like to address that. Please appreciate one thing: no authority can decide anything without giving you an opportunity if that decision was expected to be against the taxpayer. Just bear this in mind. Just bear this in mind and be very, very clear that this is what he is supposed to follow, and you will understand the entire adjudication process. So I always say, and I'm a strong believer of that, even a single rupee, I'm repeating, even a single rupee, if it is to be recovered, even a single rupee, if to be recovered by the department, a showcause notice or provision of opportunity of being heard, provision of that opportunity of being heard is mandatory. Therefore, no adjudication can happen. No adjudication can happen against the taxpayer without the issuance of showcause notice. And now we are going to cover section 73 and 74, which deals with the issuance of showcause notice and adjudication thereof. What is section 73? Let me first give a brief background of all that, and then we'll discuss in detail. Section 73 deals with the determination of your tax liability. Determination of your tax liability, which was short paid, not paid, or the refund which was erroneously taken, or the input tax credit which was wrongly availed or utilized. If any of these situations you are falling into and any amount becomes recoverable by the department, they may issue a notice to you under section 73 or section 74. If they are of the belief that there was a fraud, suppression, or misrepresentation of facts, I'm repeating, if the departmental officer is of the belief that there was involvement of fraud, suppression, or misrepresentation of facts, then in that case the notice will always be issued under section 74. Otherwise, they might issue a notice under section 73. To my understanding and belief, very rarely you will find any notice under section 73. They will always presume that there was involvement of suppression, fraud, or misrepresentation, and they will always issue the notice accordingly. They will always issue the notice under section 74, and they will extend the time barring and invoke the extended period of limitation. So we'll deal with that. What is limitation? What is the period of limitation? what is extended period, when it can be invoked, when it cannot be invoked, looking into the past precedences or the cases. Let me start with the topic. Yeah, slide please. Statutory provision. This is the statutory provision. Situation of proposing GST demand of tax, interest and penalty. Section 73 can be invoked when the tax is not paid or short paid or wrongful availment or utilization of input tax credit or refund when it is erroneously taken, but in a situation where such non-payment, short payment or erroneous refund is not because of any fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of acts. So there should not be any of the occurrences of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression by the taxpayer. Then in that case, the Showcause notice has to be issued under section 73 or determination will be done under section 73 of the law. But in case there is an involvement of fraud, suppression or misstatement, then in that case, yes, the notice will be issued under section 74. Before moving ahead, please note down one thing. Explanation 2 to section 74 must be read. Explanation 2 to section 74 must be read by all of us because that defines the term suppression. And the way and manner the term suppression is defined. The way and manner the term suppression is defined is, as per me, a draconian provision. Because even not filing a return as per the requirement of law drags you into the suppression. If something was supposed to be shown, supposed to be declared, supposed to be presented in the return, if not presented, that will lead to suppression as per the definition which is provided. Forget about the other aspects. This is a very basic aspect that a return. So all of us, I am of a belief that all of us might have done some or the other mistake unintentionally because of lack of clarity, because of the new provision, because of the new law, and there was no intention for evasion of tax. But then also we will fall into the definition or the term suppression. For the sake of brevity and for clarity to all of you, I'm just reading that definition for all of you so that you can understand the gravity of that particular term before entering and dealing into section 74 and the provisions thereafter. See, it says, for the purposes of this act, the expression suppression shall mean non-declaration of facts or information which a taxable person is required to declare in the return. If you fail to declare something in the return, it leads to suppression. Statement, report, or any other document furnished under this act or the rules made thereunder, or fails to furnish any information on being asked for in writing by the proper officer. Now, please understand and appreciate, it says anything that was supposed to be declared in the return, if not declared correctly, it leads to suppression. Okay, we can understand this. Further, it says any information which is asked for, if not supplied, that also is suppression. Meaning thereby, if somebody asks you to furnish a document which was pertaining to Mr. X and you are unable to provide that, he is asking you to furnish 26 AS of Avinash Poddar, and you are unable to provide that because you do not have the login ID and passwords, you have no contact with me. How you will provide my 26 AS? That also may lead to suppression if we read it literally. And when a terminology has such a broad meaning, it is generally Again, bluntly, I would say it is generally misused by the officers, and therefore I am of a belief that most of the notices which a taxpayer will receive in GST regime will be under section 74. They will always allege that there was a fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of acts. Now, what is the time limit for issuance of SCN? Now, first and foremost, let us appreciate one thing which is very, very important and very good so far as GST law is concerned. ऐसा नहीं है कि GST law में सब problems हैं. There are some good aspects also of GST law, and let me try to appreciate. Let me try to bring on record this good aspect. I hope many of the participants who have joined today might be practicing in GST. Might be practicing in service tax excise in the earlier regime. They all will agree and appreciate that there was a time limit for issuance of notice. I'm repeating, there was a time limit for issuance of notice in service tax or excise, but there was no time limit for adjudication of that notice. So I witnessed a situation wherein a notice was issued after within the time frame of 5 years, an extended period of limitation was invoked. They issued a notice on the verge of 5 years expiry. After that, the adjudication has taken place after 5 years. So there is a gap of 10 years. The order is against the taxpayer. It is applicability of tax, interest, and penalty. Just try to imagine the amount of interest which will be invocable. Average rate of interest in service tax was 18 to 30%. It was, let us take 20%. So 20% interest for 10 years becomes 200%. 200% of the tax liability. If my liability is 1 crore, 2 crore will be interest, 1 crore will be penalty. In totality, it will come to 4 crores. Do we expect any business to survive after paying 4 crores against the tax liability of 1 crore? And that too in a situation wherein the position is disputed. So therefore, now the best aspect which has been brought in by the GST law is there is a time limit for adjudication. There is not only the time limit for issuance of showcause notice, but there is a time limit for adjudication of the matter. And for section 73, meaning thereby all the cases which are falling, all the allegations or all the matters which are falling and covered under section 73, the period for adjudicating that particular matter is 3 years. It is 3 years. I'll deal with that. 3 years from which date? And whenever a case is being covered under section 74, the time limit is 5 years. Now 3 years from what? 3 years from the due date of furnishing of annual return. Due date of furnishing of annual return for the year to which such non-payment short payment relates. Now, this is the point which I always shared, that by asking for the extension of filing of or due date of annual return, we are indirectly making the officer, making the department comfortable, because now their time barring for issuance of adjudication order under section 73 or 74 is also by default getting extended. Are you getting the point? So it is never suggested, it is never appreciable to get the due date for filing annual return extended. You are worried about the late fees. Kindly go and pray for the waiver of late fees, because whenever the date is getting extended is not because of the incapacity of the taxpayer or the tax professional. It is mainly, and at most of the times, I'm not saying all of the times, most of the times it is because of the incapacity of the portal, the GSTN, that the date is being extended. But because of that extension of date, we are into trouble, because now the time barring also extended. Let me put an example. It is started with 2017-18. The due date for filing annual return as per the law was 31st December 2018. It was extended till 31st January 2020. The time limit which was getting over for section 74 was 31st December 2025, 5 years from the date of filing of 23, 18 plus 5. But now 31st January 2020 has made that time limit extended till 31st January 2025. So almost one year, 1 month, 13 months, the time limit has been extended. So anyways, coming back, now the order has to be issued within 3 years and within 5 years if it is under section 73, within 3 years if it is under section 74, within 5 years. And that is the best part, I would say, of this particular law, because in earlier regime it was not there, and that was causing a lot of trouble to the taxpayers. Now when the Showcause notice under section 73 or 74 is to be issued, it is at least 3 months prior to the issuance of order. Meaning thereby, if the order has to be issued by 31st January 2020, then it has to be, the Showcause notice has to be issued minimum 3 months prior to the issuance of the Showcause notice, issuance of the order. So 31st December is the last date, so it has to be issued till 30th September 2020. In section 74, if the notice has to be issued, then it has to be issued at least 6 months prior, because that is having an invocation of extended period, and therefore the time limit for issuance of Showcause notice has also been extended, and there is a broader period which is given to the taxpayer, that the notice has to be issued at least 6 months prior to the issuance of the order. Next slide, please. Yes. Now let us try to understand what is a Showcause notice. As I've already said, and I've already clarified my point of view, that even a single rupee to be recovered by the taxpayer, a Showcause notice is mandatorily required to be issued, except in one case. That was also there in the prior regime, and it is also there in the current regime, except in one case. And what is that one case? That is when you have filed a return. When you have filed a return and you have shown something as payable, then for recovery of that amount, there is no requirement for issuance of a Showcause notice. Unfortunately, I would say that this is the bad drafting of the law, because at one point in time, one place you are saying that a return cannot be filed without the payment of tax. You cannot file a return without making the payment of tax. Unless you pay the tax, you cannot make the payment of file the return. 39(7), 39(1), all those provisions are saying so. And on the contrary, you are also saying that you have filed the return but not make the payment of tax. Then in that case, there will not be any issuance of Showcause notice. They will directly do the recovery part. How it is possible, I fail to understand. Even when you read section 79, subsection 12, I think it is 79(12) only, I believe, that also says the same thing. If you have shown something payable in your returns, then there is no requirement of issuance of Showcause notice under section 73 or 74. Directly section 79 is invocable. Directly the recovery action will be initiated by the officer. So this is something which is very hard to believe, and unfortunately the lawmakers have created a mess out of it. But as per me, yes, the law nowhere restricts you to file a return without making payment of tax. You can file a return with the payable amount. The law clearly says that you are supposed to make the payment of tax within the due date for furnishing the return. Meaning thereby, if the due date is 20th, and if you are willing to file the return on 10th, you should be made eligible to file the return on 10th. But by 20th, you will have to make the payment of tax to make that return as a valid return under the GST law. Otherwise, that return will not be a valid return. This is the point of view which I am having, although the courts are not agreeing to this view, unfortunately. So what is a Showcause notice? Showcause notice is the first stage of litigation in GST. We have already deliberated this. We have already understood how and why we are saying that it is the first stage of litigation in GST. And Manish ji has already clarified that GST future lies into litigation. Lot of issuance of Showcause notices, lot of issuance of the orders which are, I would say, bad in law or without application of mine, lot of appeals to be filed, and then lot of dragging of litigation is going to happen. So this is the first stage of litigation in GST. Certainly, a Showcause notice is to be issued for proposing any demand of tax, interest, fees or penalty. Now, please bear in mind, friends, Section 75 deals with the general principles of determination and recovery. Now, when I say general principles, they have clearly laid down that interest, if not returned in Showcause notice, does not mean it is not recoverable. Interest is something which is compensatory in nature, even though it is not written in the Showcause notice or order, it is recoverable. And therefore, Showcause notice is to be issued for proposing any demand of tax, interest, fees, or penalty, and is required to be issued for taking action with respect to payment of tax collected from any person which has not been deposited with the government exchequer. So this is something, the Showcause notice is something wherein the person is asked to deposit the tax which is not paid or short paid, the refund which is erroneously claimed, or the ITC which is wrongly availed or utilized by the taxpayer. Under GST, the department is required to assign when, again, we have already discussed this, in all these four situations, in any of these four situations, if you are falling into, then yes, you are supposed to issue a Showcause notice. Kindly, next slide, please. Now, I think we have skipped one slide. Yeah, please. Next, please. I'm sorry. Yes. Now, as soon as we receive a Showcause notice, now I would like to mention here, although chartered accountants are participating in this conference, but I would like to point out this thing, which is very, very important if you want to be in litigations. See, being into or willing to be into litigations, we need to develop one thing, which I have also developed after 17, 18 years of practice. Any notice which we receive, we need to dissect that notice. We need to understand that notice in totality. When I say totality, it means who has issued, under what section that has been issued, what are the allegations, what are the basis of allegations, whether the submissions made by us are taken on records, whether the officer was empowered to issue that Showcause notice, whether any approval was required and that has been taken, whether the procedure or the pattern that was supposed to be followed has been followed. All these aspects are supposed to be taken into consideration before, I'm repeating, before replying to the notice. See, when a proceedings starts, when you will say that a proceeding has started, if a person sends you a notice, that is not the start of proceeding, to my belief. When you reply back to that notice, that is the start of proceeding. So you might have seen there are a lot of notices which are being issued by the officers from the email ID which is outlook.com, Avinash Poddar at outlook.com, or preventive at outlook.com, range so and so and outlook.com, yeah, gmail.com. Those IDs are not the official IDs, and therefore no need to revert back on those IDs. And therefore, to fight with this situation, there is a concept of number. I think it's known as document identification number, which is there on all the letters which is being issued by the authorities, by the central authorities. from November 2019 onwards. So we need to look into that. And over the period of time, I have also learned that as soon as we receive a notice, we need to dissect that notice in totality, and then thereafter, if we find that yes, the reply has to be made. See, please note, I am not suggesting not to reply on a notice or a summons. It is our responsibility and it is our duty to reply back to any document, any correspondence that we receive from the department. We cannot take that lightly, because that may lead to an offense. That may lead to an offense. It may also lead to prosecution, and therefore I'm not suggesting that don't reply on the show cause notice or don't reply on summons. I'm merely saying, please read that, please understand, please dissect that correctly, and then you reply back. And this is a difference. This is a difference which I would like to point out. I'm sure that most of you will not like this, but being into litigation or willing to be into litigation, you need to understand this, that a lawyer generally, when he receives a notice, he dissects that notice, try to understand under which section it has been issued, who has issued this, why that has been issued, how it has been issued, whether rightly issued or not. Then once he is satisfied, he starts complying with that. Otherwise, he challenges the notice itself. Whereas we professionals, we chartered accountants, are more into compliance. And as soon as we receive a notice, we start complying with that notice. That is not the right way of doing the compliance part of a show cause notice. And let us try to discuss how to analyze the show cause notice with this background. Now, since the show cause notice is the foundation of notice's defense, therefore, the noticee should critically examine the show cause notice to ensure that all the defenses available to him are being taken without prejudice to each other. This is the first task that we should do. And therefore, I have again and again said, while deliberating, that we need to dissect the notice in totality, understand in totality. We need to also understand the validity of SCN. That is also very important. Section 75, which deals with the general principles, needs to be taken into account, and the validity of the SCN which has been issued to us must be checked. Further, the show cause notice must be issued within the time frame which is listed or which is mentioned in section 73 or 74, which says 3 months or 6 months from the date of issuance, from the issuance of order. Now, if we read the provision, let me just open up for the benefit of all of us. Section 73, subsection 2, it says the proper officer shall issue the notice under subsection 1 at least 3 months prior to the limit specified in subsection 10, that is 3 years for issuance of order. Now, what does it say? It says shall issue the notice. It is merely saying the issue of notice. It is not, it should reach the taxpayer at least 3 months prior. That is a point which needs to be taken care of. I'm repeating, section 73 subsection 2, please read that, or section 74 subsection 2, just read that. It specifies only the issuance of notice 3 months prior. It is not said receipt of notice or service of notice 3 months prior. So keep that in mind. You all are learned. I'll not drag into further, because this can lead to a lot of confusion. This can lead to a lot of things, but this certainly can be misused by the tax officer. He can issue a letter as per the requirement of law. He can issue a notice, but that notice may not be served on time. Anyways, there are various other defenses for that. Anyways, it says show cause notice must be issued within the time limit prescribed under section 73 or 74 of the Act. it should be issued along with the documents relied upon by the department. Again, very, very important, very important. There are various judgment which says the day when you receive the relied upon documents, that is the day when you will say that you have received the notice. Meaning thereby, issuance and receipt of a showcause notice is not sufficient. Along with that showcause notice, whatever documents are being relied upon for issuance of that showcause notice must also be served along with that showcause notice by the department. And this is a point which has to be taken into account, and it has to be taken seriously by all the tax professionals, because this may become a situation wherein you can simply get the showcause notice quashed. However, if the relied upon documents are made available subsequent to the receipt of showcause notice, then the date of receipt of relied upon document shall be considered as date of receipt of SC. Are you getting the point? The officer might issue a showcause notice to me, let's say on 1st of December, but he is giving or handing over the relied upon documents let's say on 1st of January. Then the receipt of showcause notice will not be the date of 1st December, it will be 1st January 2020. Although the law is silent on the receipt of showcause notice, but the intention of the lawmaker is clear that the showcause notice must be issued at least 3 months prior. Issuance of notice and keeping with you is not the intention. It has to be issued. And when I say issued, since it is the entire GST gamut is electronic, it must reach also at least 3 months prior. That should be read. That should be read in this fashion. It is not shall issue the notice 3 months prior. It should also shall issue and reach 3 months prior, because generally the notices are being issued electronically. DRC 01A, DRC 01, it is being issued electronically, and therefore it should reach immediately 3 months prior. So please bear in mind, the date of receipt is very, very important for showcause notice. And if you do not receive the relied upon documents, the service of showcause notice is said to be wrong, and it will be said to be served or said to be received only on the day when you receive the relied upon documents. And this has been held in various judgments, that merely making the relied upon documents available for inspection is not sufficient, and copies of the relied upon documents have to be furnished. Santojan Silk Mills versus Commissioner of Central Excise, 2003, State Mumbai. PGO Processors Private Limited versus Central Excise Commissioner, 2000, it is Rajasthan High Court. Next slide, please. So these are the judgments which you can bear in mind, keep in mind, and this will help you in future whenever you are arguing a matter with regards to the receipt of showcause notice or the time limit for the issuance for the receipt of showcause notice. I do agree and appreciate, and I've read that section 73 subsection 2, section 74 subsection 2 deals with the issuance of showcause notice at least 3 months or 6 months prior. But to my understanding and to my belief, whenever a showcause notice is to be issued, it has to be issued with the DIN number. It has to be issued electronically. And when something is issued electronically, there cannot be a time gap between the issuance and the receipt. And therefore, it impliedly means that the showcause notice must be received 3 months or 6 months prior to the date of issuance of order. Moving further, friends, jurisdiction. That again is very, very important, because the officer who has issued the showcause notice must have jurisdiction. If a person who does not have jurisdiction issues a showcause notice, that showcause notice is liable to be set aside or quashed. When I say jurisdiction, what does it mean? Please appreciate, in GST, we are dealing with dual GST concept, state GST and central GST. And the tax payers are distributed between state authorities and central authorities, and therefore a jurisdiction officer is there. So if I am falling into the central GST, and the Showcause notice is issued by state GST, that Showcause notice is bad in law, as per my view. Only in limited circumstances the cross empowerment is given, otherwise it is not there. And that is only one situation when it is an enforcement action, which is an intelligence based enforcement action. So if any intelligence based enforcement action is taken against me, then an officer who does not have jurisdiction can also issue a notice to me. But in case it is a regular assessment, a Showcause notice can never be issued by any officer other than the person who has jurisdiction on me. So, and even if you are falling into the central GST, if there are 3 commissionerates in one city, then the other commissionerate who has no jurisdiction on you cannot issue the Showcause notice to you. It can be issued only by the commissionerate who has the jurisdiction, and therefore it becomes very, very important while analyzing and understanding the Showcause notice that whether it is being issued within jurisdiction by the officer who is issuing it or not. The noticee should examine whether the notice is issued by its jurisdictional proper officer, and if not, then it can be challenged on this ground. The Showcause notice per se, forget about the grounds, forget about the defenses. The Showcause notice itself can be challenged and it can be made liable for being struck down or set aside. Further, the Showcause notice must be issued by proper officer as per the monetary limits. There is a notification issued, there is a circular issued by the government wherein they have given the monetary limits. They have said till 10 lakhs, a superintendent can issue a Showcause notice. Till, this is merely an example, till 1 crore, the Showcause notice can be issued by the, let's say, joint commissioner, assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner. More than 1 crore, it can be issued by additional commissioner or joint commissioner. So there is a time limit. There is a monetary limit which is affixed and circulated by the department, that you are the officer who are empowered or who is authorized to issue a Showcause notice, provided the monetary amount involved in that issuance of Showcause notice is this much. If I have a limit of 10 lakhs, I cannot issue a notice of 10 lakh 1 rupee. I can issue a notice only to the extent of 10 lakhs. Allegement of liability 10 lakhs. So therefore, as soon as you receive a notice, please look into the amount which is there. Look into the authority who is issuing it, whether it is superintendent, whether it is the commissioner, whether it is joint commissioner, whosoever it is. And then look into that circular, that whether that monetary limit condition has been satisfied or not. If not, then certainly you can appear, you can say or you can argue that the Showcause notice per se, which is issued by the authority, is out of jurisdiction and therefore it is liable to be set aside. Invocation of a statutory provision. Now, as I've already said, you have to do 360-degree analysis. It has to be proper and complete analysis. It cannot be a partial analysis, and therefore you also have to look into the statutory provision which has been invoked by the tax authority. The noticee should examine whether all the relevant statutory provisions are mentioned, reproduced in the SCN or not. He is alleging something, but he has not mentioned the provision under which such allegation is made. Then that notice is bad in law. So therefore, the pattern or the procedure for issuance of a Showcause notice, although it is not specified in the GST law, but yes, it is a settled principle how it has to be issued. First, facts needs to be mentioned, then the legal grounds needs to be mentioned, then the allegations have to be mentioned. It needs to be supported with the statutory provisions, and then the final allegations and the liability and the Showcause amount should be mentioned. So there is a proper provision for that, and hence, while analyzing the Showcause notice, after the receipt of the Showcause notice, you also are supposed to look into the statutory provisions which have been invoked against you, and whether those statutory provisions have been clearly mentioned, and his point of view on the basis of which he is alleging has been taken care of and specifically mentioned in the Showcause notice or not. Next, Rule 142 is properly followed or not by the proper officer issuing the show cause notice. This again is very, very, very important. I've mentioned one case. This is being argued by me before the Honorable Gujarat High Court. Lately, you all might have witnessed what they were doing, what the department was doing. They started issuing notices for recovery of interest under Section 50, Subsection 1 on gross value. They have done that in many of the cases. Rather, thousands and thousands of the cases they have done that. Now, friends, in this case, what has happened? They have issued the letter for Section 50, Subsection 1. At the same time, they have also issued DRC 01. Now, friends, DRC 01 can be issued as per Rule 142, Sub Rule 1. Rule 142 clearly lays down when DRC 01 or DRC 01A can be issued. It can be issued under particular sections, and out of those sections which are specified there or mentioned there, Section 50, Subsection 1 is not finding the place. And therefore, it becomes very, very important for us to understand which sections are alleged and invoked in that particular show cause notice, and whether that show cause notice can be issued. So Rule 142 does not contemplate a situation wherein a recovery has been initiated or a determination of liability or a determination of interest has been initiated under Section 50, Subsection 1, or a notice has been issued under Section 50, Subsection 1. And therefore, the court has issued a notice to them that since Section 50, Subsection 1 is not specified under Rule 142, how you can issue DRC 01, how you can issue a show cause notice. So the point which I'm trying to raise is, it is not merely sufficient to just get a show cause notice, see the sections, see the allegations, but also you are supposed to see the provisions of the law, the rules, the procedures. Rule 142, under which that show cause notice is to be issued, whether that Rule 142 contemplates, whether it provides for the issuance of DRC 01 or DRC 01A for any breach of Section 50, Subsection 1? The answer is no. So that becomes very, very important. If that has happened, then you can approach the appropriate authority and get the show cause notice itself quashed. The show cause notice must be very specific with respect to the allegation and should not be suffered from vagueness and arbitrariness. It should not be arbitrary. It has to be very, very specific, and the allegations, reasons for allegations, and the manner in which the liability is being computed or determined must be very specific. It cannot be arbitrary or vague. Without proper show cause notice, demand cannot be confirmed against the noticee. This I have already mentioned. Even 1 rupee, if to be recovered, the show cause notice has to be issued. The opportunity of being heard must be given following the principles of natural justice. Whenever the department places reliance on the statement of a third party and the same is not made available to the noticee, he must ask for the same and cross-examine. Very, very, very important, friends, because generally we avoid this. You will receive a show cause notice saying that Mr. Avinash was called for a statement, and we have recorded a statement of Mr. Avinash, who has said that he has not supplied any goods. He has not supplied any goods to Mr. Gaurav, and therefore, since you have not received any goods, you are ineligible. You have not complied with the conditions of Section 16, Subsection 2, and therefore the credit will not be eligible, and you need to reverse the credit along with interest, penalty, so and so. Whenever such kind of notice is given to you, wherein the department is relying on the statement of a third party, please bear in mind, you can not only ask for the copies of the statement of those third parties if not provided, but you can also ask for cross-examining of those third parties. Very important to keep in mind. You are empowered, the assessee, the taxpayer is empowered. If something is spoken against him, then he is empowered, he is authorized, he has the right of cross-examination, and therefore you can seek that right. You can ask the officer that you want to cross-examine the third party on the or the statement of whom the department or the officer is relying upon. So this again is very, very important principle to be kept in mind while analyzing, while understanding, while preparing your reply to the show cause notice. Please bear all these points in mind, including the statement of the third party, including the relied upon documents, including the provisions of the law which is made applicable or invoked, including the rules which are supposed to be followed for the purpose of issuance of show cause notice. Please dissect, please understand, please look into all these aspects before jumping on to replying the show cause notice. Next slide, please. Now, these are few settled principles when an extended period cannot be invoked. Now, let me just take 2-3 minutes and try to deliberate and discuss the extended period and why and how it is to be invoked. See, when I say extended period, it means that your limitation is getting extended. Otherwise, the law contemplates, the law provides for the limitation of 3 years under section 73. If there is no fraud, suppression, willful misstatement, then it is 3 years. So the normal limitation which is being provided for adjudicating a matter, adjudicating a case under GST is 3 years. But in certain circumstances, like when there is a fraud due to which there is evasion of tax, when there is a suppression due to which there is evasion of tax, or there is short payment of tax, in all those situations, the extended period is extended. The limitation period is extended to 5 years. So please bear in mind, unless the show cause notice, I'm repeating, unless the show cause notice categorically emphasize and specify the involvement of fraud, suppression, or misrepresentation. I'm repeating again, unless the show cause notice clearly specifies that these are the reasons on which or due to which I believe that there was an involvement of fraud, suppression, or willful misstatement, they cannot invoke section 74. A very practical aspect, let me share with all of you. In GST nowadays, whatever happen, the officers, what they are doing is, they are alleging that whatever credit you have taken is bad in law. You have never purchased, you have never received those goods. It is merely a document or a adjustment entry or a supply of invoice. And then they ask you to reverse that credit under section 74. Now, why to reverse that under section 74? They will have to prove, they will have to establish that there was a fraud, there was a suppression, there was a willful misstatement. If you are able to prove that there was no suppression, no willful statement, no fraud, it was a bona fide belief and I have purchased the goods from him, and now if he is absconding, how I am made liable for reversal of those credits when I have made the entire legal payment to him? It is a double loss to me, double jeopardy, which may not be a case with me. I might have received the goods. So in that case, you are supposed to address and reply back that the extended period cannot be invoked in your case because you have not evaded anything, and therefore all of the officers are now pressing for 74. And if any amount is to be paid through DRC 03, they are saying pay under 74 subsection 5. As soon as you will invoke section 74 subsection 5, it will clearly say, or it will be clearly an admission that you are liable to make payment of penalty also to the tune of 15%. Why 15%? We'll deal with that. Now, since we are discussing the Showcause notice only up till now, let me discuss with the settled principles which are pertaining to the extended period of limitation. Now, in this following circumstances, following situation, the extended period is not invocable. You cannot invoke the extended period. 1. Where the issue involves interpretation of law. Where the issue involves interpretation of law. At the inception of my session, I was discussing about a case wherein an arrest has been made. And the allegation is classification issue. I say I am exempted. Therefore, I have not collected even a single rupee. And since I have not collected, I have not paid. Also, I have not claimed any input tax credit. Whereas the department is alleging that no, you are wrongly classifying yourself. As per the classification, you are being classified or you are falling into the 5% tax rate. And merely on the basis of such interpretation issue or classification issue, they have arrested me. Now, when there are settled principles of law, which says that even an extended period cannot be invoked on the interpretational issue, where is the question of arresting a person? Plus, the arrest can happen in the situations which are specified in section 132, which deals with the evasion of tax once the amount is collected and not paid. In the example which I have shared with all of you, there is no collection of tax. So therefore, settled principle is whenever an issue is involving the interpretation of law, there cannot be invocation of extended period. Whenever the act is a bona fide act, I believed this act to be true. Extended period cannot be invoked. Now this becomes very difficult and challenging for all of us to prove the bona fide act. So in that case, I would always recommend to make the bona fide act a return act. When I say return act, it means if you have confusion, if you have a belief that whether it is taxable or not, whether this is applicable to you or not, whether you are eligible for credit or not, whatever question you have in mind regarding which you have a lack of clarity, what you can do is you can simply write back to your jurisdictional commissioner that this is what I am doing on the basis of this understanding. Substantiate your view with proper arguments and logic and submit a letter to him. 99.9% of the cases he will never look into those situations, he will never revert you back. And in case he reverts back, then obviously you have an option to rectify those mistakes and prove that whatever you have done till date was a bona fide act. If it does not look into that letter, which is the highest probability, then also you have established before the authority that this was your belief and that belief was bona fide. So whenever a bona fide act happens, the issuance of notice invoking extended period is not allowed. Further, the issue remained the subject matter of litigation for a considerable period of time, like renting of immoral property. It's a litigation which is being continued since years. So if there is any issue on which the litigation is being prolonged or litigation is already being there, then in that case also the extended period cannot be invoked by the officer. Where the confusion exists on the general practice is not to charge service tax or GST. So whenever there is a confusion, like a service being provided to an educational institution, whether it is exempt, an educational institution providing a coaching services, as an addition to the normal course of education service, whether taxable. So if some event, maybe it is taxable, but if the entire industry is following a principle and not paying the tax on the basis of a particular understanding or let's say confusion, then in that case, the extended period cannot be invoked. So these are certain principles, friends, which have been derived over the period of time and which clearly says that in these circumstances, the extended period cannot be invoked. There are certain cases also which I have involved. Element of fraud collusion is must. If you want to extend to invoke the extended period, if you want to invoke the extended period for issuance of Showcause notice, you must prove that there was an element of fraud collusion. Therefore, if entire data is disclosed in ST3 or GST return or service tax return, you cannot say that there was misrepresentation, there was suppression, and therefore extended period of 5 years under section 74 cannot be invoked. What is the benefit of not being covered into the extended period? Give me some time, I'll clarify that also. Extended period cannot be invoked where the department itself is not clear about the facts. When the department itself is having its own doubts, they are not clear about the provisions of the law or the applicability of a provision of the law, they cannot invoke the extended period. Extended period cannot be invoked where the department was aware of the facts as the SSC provided the requisite information. This is what I have said. Write a letter, provide all the informations to them, then they cannot invoke the extended period because they were already made aware by us. Mere failure to declare would not amount to willful suppression, since for willful suppression, the positive act from the side of assessee shall be formed. So, it may arise a situation wherein there is a failure to disclose something. Mere failure to disclose that will not push you towards the suppression. It will not be a willful suppression because for being covered under the term willful suppression, you are supposed to do an act deliberately to suppress some information, and therefore this case law of Infinity Infotech Parks Limited versus Union of India of Honorable Delhi High Court has clearly said it will not lead to the suppression, and therefore the extended period cannot be invoked. Next slide, please. Now coming back to the statutory provision 73(5) and 74(5), it deals with the voluntary payment of tax. Now when I say voluntary payment of tax, we need to be very much clear about this fact that if we find any liability not paid completely, if there is some liability which is unpaid, and we believe that yes, the liability has been missed by us and it is unpaid, then in that case we can go before the authority, we can make the payment along with the applicable interest, and we can get rid of the applicable penalties. So therefore section 73 says, once I admit the liability, irrespective of the fact whether that liability is on the basis of my own ascertainment, that is the ascertainment of the taxpayer, or the determination or ascertainment of the tax officer, I may pay that liability along with interest, applicable interest, and therefore and submit a intimation DRC 03 to the officer, and the officer will not issue a Showcause notice to me. Further, second limb says under section 74, I will have to pay tax along with interest and 15% of the penalty. So this is the point which is very, very crucial when extended period is invoked. If extended period is invoked, your case will fall into section 74. As soon as your case will fall under section 74, the minimum penalty which is invocable in your case will be 15%. So that is to be avoided. That is to be avoided, and therefore our efforts should be to prove that there was no suppression, there was no fraud, there was no willful misstatement. if the applicable pay tax along with the applicable interest within 30 days from the date of issuance of notice. Now that was before the issuance of Showcause Notice 74.5. Now if I pay after the issuance of Showcause Notice but within 30 days from the date of issuance of Showcause Notice, then also under section 73, I am only supposed to pay tax and interest. There will be no imposition of penalty on me. Whereas under section 74, the minimum amount of penalty will shoot up to 25%. It will not be 15%. If I pay before the issuance of Showcause Notice and intimate the officer, then it will be 15%. If I pay after the issuance of Showcause Notice and within 30 days from the issuance of Showcause Notice, it will be tax plus interest plus 30 days. Plus 25% of the penalty within 30 days. If I do this, then my matter will be resolved. It will be settled. If I don't do this, then they will issue the order. If the officer is of the opinion that the amount paid by the assessee is still short, then he may issue a Showcause Notice. He may issue a notice to you. Next, please. Yes. Quantum of penalty, we have already discussed. Under section 73, before issuance of notice, no penalty. Within 30 days, if I pay the tax along with interest, again no penalty. If I pay tax interest after 30 days of the issuance of order, then in that case it will be 10% or 10,000, whichever is higher. That will be the amount which has to be paid as the penalty. Under section 74, the minimum penalty before issuance of Showcause Notice is 15%. After issuance of Showcause Notice, if I pay tax, interest and 25% of the penalty, then it will be 25%. After 30 days of the receipt of order, if I pay tax and interest and 50% of the penalty, then it is 50%, 50. Otherwise, the maximum penalty is 100%. Now, friends, a very, very important thing to be kept in mind, which I have not incorporated in the presentation, it is section 73, subsection 11. Please read that. It has a non-obstant clause. It clearly says if you pay under subsection 6 or subsection 8, that is before the issuance of Showcause Notice, if you are making a payment and intimating to the officer, but if it is being made after 30 days from the due date, in that case 10% penalty is applicable to you. So please bear that in mind, that will be the minimum penalty under section 73 also. Next slide, please. So friends, we have dealt with section 73 and 74. Now there are general principles which we need to just keep in mind for complying with section 73 or 74 and for understanding the Showcause notices in much better manner and replying back to it. These are the general principles which we need to understand. So I'll just read through and go through fine at a faster pace so that we can cover few other aspects in the remaining time, because I believe we have around 25 minutes, 25-30 minutes more, and I'll try to complete within that time frame. General principles under section 75, it says, where the service of notice or issuance of notice is stayed by an order of a court or an appellate tribunal, then such period of stay shall be excluded for the period of issuance of notice under section 73 or 74. So this period will not be included for the purpose of calculation of 3 months or 6 months under section 73 or 74. Now, where the appellate authority, tribunal or court concludes that the charge of fraud, etc. is not proved or is not getting established, then the notice which was issued under section 74 will now be deemed to be a notice under section 73, and therefore, in spite of 5 years, the liability will be of 3 years. The opportunity of hearing shall be granted on receipt of a request in writing, and wherein any adverse decision is contemplated against person chargeable with tax or penalty. This is the point which I have already addressed. Any decision which is going to impact the liability, increase the liability, reduce the refund, or which is going to be detrimental to the taxpayer, the opportunity of being heard is mandatorily to be given. The proper officer can adjourn the personal hearing if there are sufficient causes, but maximum adjournments can be 3. It can be extended to 3 times. Order cannot be passed beyond the scope of SCN in terms of an amount of tax, interest and penalty as well as grounds specified in the notice. Now this is again very important. Let's say the department has alleged one aspect of mine, one activity of mine, and they have raised a Showcause notice of 30 lakhs. After going into deeper litigation, deeper investigation, they came to know that it is not 30 lakhs, it is 2 crores. But now since the Showcause notice was already issued, they are empowered to adjudicate maximum to the extent of 30 lakhs. They cannot go to 2 crores. For going into the aspect of 2 crore, they will have to again issue a Showcause notice. Now whether that Showcause notice for the same period, same event, same allegation can be issued or not is a matter of interpretation. But to the extent a Showcause notice has been issued, the amount is now maximum amount which can be recovered. If the recovery is going to be for the, or if the recovery is expected to be of a higher amount, then also since the Showcause notice is issued and it carries an amount, the amount cannot exceed the amount which is specified in the Showcause notice. Yeah, please, next slide. Interest of tax not paid or short payment shall be payable whether or not specified in the order. This I've already dealt with. The adjudication proceeding shall be deemed to be concluded where the order is not issued in 3 months or 5 years, 3 years or 5 years. So it is now again very clear, time barring ho jayega. And if not decided within 3 years or 5 years, the matter will be concluded and he will not be in a position to issue further Showcause notice to him or adjudicate the matter further. Further is any decision or given by the appellate authority or appellate tribunal or high court which is prejudicial to the interest of revenue in some other proceedings against which the appeal is pending before the appellate tribunal or high court or supreme court, then the period is spent between the date of decision of the respective authority at respective stages shall be excluded for the purpose of computing the time barring for issuance of order under section 73 or 74. So 5 years or 3 years will be extended accordingly. So I'm not dealing into this now. Notwithstanding anything contained in 73 or 74, this is important. Where any amount of self-assessed tax is in accordance with the return furnished under section 39 remains unpaid, either wholly or partly, or any amount of interest payable on such tax remains unpaid, the same shall be recovered under the provisions of section 79. So this is the provision which I was discussing with all of you, section 75 subsection 12, which clearly lays down and has an overriding impact. It is a non-extant clause. It says anything which is mentioned in 73 or 74, irrespective of that, wherever any amount is self-assessed, you have filed a return and shown that, then that amount becomes recoverable under section 79. Unfortunate part is this is not possible practically because you cannot file a return. 3B is not enabled, or you cannot file 3B without making payment of tax, and therefore this situation will never arise. Where any penalty is imposed under section 73 or 74, no penalty shall be imposed for the same act or omission on such person under any other provision of the act. So once the penalties are imposed under 73 or 74, no other penalty can be imposed on it. Move further. Next slide, please. Tax collected but not paid. Again, very, very important. Now you have collected something. You said that it is not a tax, and you have collected something, but you have failed to pay the tax. So the provision section 76, again a non-obstant clause, it said notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in any order or direction of an appellate authority or appellate tribunal or court in any other provisions of this act or rules made thereunder or any other law for the time being enforced. Now every person who has collected from any other person any amount as representing the tax under this act and has not paid this said amount to the government shall forthwith pay the said amount to the government, irrespective of whether the supplies in respect of which the amount was collected are taxable or not. If let's say if something was not taxable, it was exempt, but still you have collected tax, saying that to be taxable, then you are liable to make the payment of such amount that you have collected as tax. That is what this provision says. Where any amount is required to be paid to the government under subsection 1 and which has not been paid, the proper officer may serve showcause notice for tax and equivalent penalty. The proper officer shall, after considering the representation, determine the amount due from such person, and thereupon such person shall pay the amount so determined. So whatever representation you are making, he will consider that representation and he will issue an order, pass an order, and then thereafter you will be eligible, you will be liable to make the payment of such amount. Next slide, please. The person referred to in subsection 1 shall also be liable to pay interest thereon at the rate which is specified in section 50 from the date such amount was collected by him to the date such amount is paid by him. An opportunity of hearing shall be granted where a request is received in writing. Opportunity of hearing shall be granted when a request is received in writing from the person to whom the notice has been issued. That means a showcause notice. So the principle of natural justice is supposed to be followed here also. Now the time barring. The proper officer shall issue an order within 1 year from the date of issuance of notice. Now please bear in mind, this is the time limit for issuance of notice, issuance of order. There is no time limit for issuance of notice. So he will have to issue the order from the date of issuance of notice. Next slide, please. Now again it is said, whenever an order is issued and it is stayed by the court or appellate tribunal, the period of such a stay shall be excluded in computing the period of 1 year. So that 1 year period for issuance of the order will be excluded from computing the period. The proper officer in his order shall set out the relevant facts and basis of his decision. And last but not the least, the person who has borne the incidence of tax may apply for the refund of the same in accordance with the provisions of section 54. The person from whom the tax has been collected by the taxpayer, saying that or alleging that to be a tax, is also eligible to claim the refund under section 54. So even if it is the liability is passed on and collected by the taxpayer, it is liable to be refunded to the person from whom the tax has been collected. Next slide, please. We all are aware about this section, so I'll not be dealing into this. Tax wrongly collected and paid. You are supposed to collect CGST and IGST, SGST, and you have collected IGST. Now the law says you pay the right tax first. That means in my example in C and S first, there will be no interest imposition, and you can claim the refund of the tax which was wrongly paid by you. But the tax which was correctly to be paid is to be paid first, and then the refund can be claimed. So this is a provision of section 77. I'm not dealing into this provision because we all are aware. I'm presuming that we all are aware about this. So moving to next slide, please. Friends, probably section 73, 74 I've dealt with, and 75, 76, 77 also, and the adjudication part is completed. Adjudication part is completed, rather most of the adjudication part and the analysis of showcause notice, how it has to be looked into, what is to be looked into, I've tried to deal upon. And now I would wish to deal with another very important and practical issue which is being faced by most of the taxpayers, rather majority of the taxpayers. I'll not say the most will be a wrong word. Majority of the taxpayers are facing this issue of section 83, the provisional attachment of bank account, the provisional attachment of properties. Whenever there is an allegation that you have claimed a wrong input tax credit, or you have not made the payment of tax correctly, there is a short payment of tax or whatsoever. So they are attaching the accounts, the properties. In relation to this, I would like to just share my view. There are n number of judgments, multiple matters I have issued, I have argued before various courts. The law is very clear. It says you are eligible for provisional attachment when? It says whenever there is a pending proceeding, under any of these sections, that is section 62, section 63, section 64, 67, 73 or 74, whenever any proceedings are pending against the taxpayer under any of these sections, and the commissioner is of the opinion, now this is very, very important, the commissioner is of the opinion that for the purpose of protecting the interest of government revenue. So please bear in mind, friends, it is not a case that whenever your proceeding is pending under section 62, 63, 64, 67, 73, 74, section 83 is invocable. No, it is not invocable unless the commissioner is of the opinion that for the purpose of protecting the interest, unless the commissioner is of the opinion that for the purpose of protecting the interest of the revenue, it is necessary so to do, then he may order in writing for attachment of any property, including the bank account, belonging to the taxable person in such manner as may be prescribed. So please bear in mind the department is taking actions every now and then without any application of mine, looking into the first limb of this particular provision of 83, whereas the provision has to be read in totality, and it clearly says that unless the commissioner is of the opinion that in order to protect the interest of revenue, it is necessary to do, unless it is necessary to do so as to protect the interest of the revenue, the attachment cannot happen. The attachment cannot be ordered. Two judgments are mentioned here, Gandhi Trading versus Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax and Pranith Hemdesai versus Additional Director General. You can also note down another judgment, which is a wonderful judgment of Velarius Industries. I've recorded also in my YouTube channel also, you'll find the analysis of that judgment. Velarius Industries versus the State of Gujarat versus Union of India, sorry. It clearly lays down, the Honorable Gujarat High Court have laid down the principles. You should download and read that judgment. I think 125 pages judgment is that. And it clearly lays down the principles when an attachment can happen. Who can attach? What is the situation under which it can be attached? And it clearly lays down one very strong principle that unless the commissioner is of the opinion that it is important, it is mandatory, it is necessary to protect, to attach the assets, including bank account, in order to protect the interest of the revenue. It also have laid down the principle that this should be the last recourse. The attachment of properties or the bank account should be the last recourse, specifically the bank account attachment. But the department is not following it. Department has started attaching the bank account first, whereas the principle laid down by the Honorable Court says very clear that the bank account attachment should be last recourse. If you are not able to recover from any source, then you should move forward and you should attach the bank account. Otherwise, the bank account should not be attached. And you also will find in various situations they have attached the bank accounts, which is a CC or an overdraft account. Now the question arises whether the CC, cash credit account, or the overdraft account can be attached. To the extent it has a clear balance of the taxpayer, yes, it can be attached because that becomes the property of the taxpayer. But to the extent it is having a limit which is utilized, let's say I have a limit of 1 crore, 50 lakhs is already utilized and 50 lakhs is the balance. That account as per me cannot be utilized, cannot be attached. So section 83 becomes very, very important. Nowadays the department is taking cognizance and is invoking powers under section 73 very oftenly. They are attaching the properties, bank accounts, and therefore this may become a huge part of litigation in the times to come. And therefore I have incorporated this, because for adjudication also, what they are doing is, if a Showcause notice is issued to you under section 73 or 74, it means that the proceeding under section 73 or 74 is pending. And since the proceedings are pending under 73 or 74, they can attach your bank account, they can attach your properties, and they are generally doing it. So therefore, it was necessary for me to incorporate and discuss this particular section. So please bear in mind, friends, please bear in mind, Pranith Hem Desai is a very good judgment. At the same time, please read the judgment of Velaris Industries, Honorable Gujarat High Court. If need be, I will be sharing this judgment also with Gauravji. He will share with the group. But that is again a very, very important judgment, laying down the principles when the attachment can happen and when the attachment cannot happen or is said to be bad in law. And it also specifies very clearly that the attachment of bank account should be the last recourse. It cannot be the first action of recovery. If you are not able to recover from any source, still you are of the belief that it will become difficult from him to for the tax officer to recover from such taxpayer, or he will abscond, then in order to protect the interest of the revenue, he may attach the bank account. Otherwise, the bank account attachment is never suggested by any of the courts. So moving further, next slide please. We are reaching to the concluding parts of our discussion. Now, controversy with regards to recovery, this also is very important to understand, and therefore I have tried to incorporate this. And then I will deal with some of the questions which I was supposed to answer as per the request of Gauravji. So I think within the time limit, I'll be able to cover. The question is, can recovery be initiated prior to adjudication? Can you start recovery prior to adjudicating or determining my tax liability? Now, where the competent authority has attached bank accounts, since assessee has not issued notice under section 74 or any other sections quoted in 83, writ petition deserved to be allowed. This we have already discussed. Next is, no tax can be collected without adjudication. This is a judgment of service tax regime, but still it will be finding a good place in GST also, because unless you determine a liability, unless that liability is what I can say, settled or finalized or reached, unless that liability reaches to the finality, the recovery cannot be initiated. Because even after the order under section 73 or 74, you have a right of appeal under section 107. So he will have to wait for 3 months or 4 months rather, because there is a continuation of delay provision also for 30 days. You'll have to wait for 4 months. If within 4 months I am not filing the appeal, then you can initiate the recovery procedure. So therefore, the answer to this particular question, can recovery be initiated prior to adjudication, as per me, is negative. They cannot initiate the recovery proceedings. And even if you look into section 79, it says the tax payable to the recovered. When a liability becomes payable, when a tax becomes payable, as per my belief, the tax becomes payable only when it is determined. Unless it is determined, it is not payable. So therefore, my answer would be no, the recovery cannot be initiated prior to adjudication. Next slide, please. Yes, again, very, very important. What does this say? It says controversy with regard to multiple authorities approaching the taxable person. You are finding, or you might be finding this also very often. First, a CGST officer comes to your place. He conducts a search operation. After some time, the state officers come to your place. Then after a few days, the Department of GST Intelligence comes into your place. So multiple authorities approaches you, comes to your place. What will happen in this case? So we have approached before the Honorable Gujarat High Court in one of the matters, which is listed here, Bhavani Textiles versus Additional Director General, wherein we have argued. Then there is a letter issued by CBEC on 5th October 2018, wherein they have clearly laid down the principles which were discussed in the GST Council meeting, 9th GST Council meeting. They have said that unless an action is initiated and that action is intelligence-based enforcement action, no cross jurisdiction is allowed. Meaning thereby, if there is an action which is an intelligence-based enforcement action, that is search, the cross empowerment not allowed. Meaning thereby, if I have a jurisdiction of state, central officer can come to my premise only when the action is initiated by them and it is an intelligence-based enforcement action. Otherwise, they can never come to my premises. This is what is laid down in this particular letter of 5th October 2018. Further, it is also said that the authority who will commence the action will conclude. So in my example, what I have given is, first the CGST officers come, initiated search, then thereafter the SGST officer came, then thereafter the DGTI came. So now to whom should I go? To whom should I approach for conclusion of my matter? Then this reference is very important, 5th October 2018, and the judgment which I have mentioned, Bhavani Textiles argued by me only. It is taking cognizance of this particular letter, which is 5th October 2018 dated. It clearly says the officer or the authorities who will initiate such action, which is in intelligence-based enforcement action, will conclude, and rest of the authorities will not continue with the operations. If they have any information, if they have any documents, then that can be handed over to the authority who have initiated such action. So this is also very important, whether the cross jurisdiction or empowerment is allowed. In case of administrative action, the answer is absolute no. I'm repeating, in case of administrative action, the answer is absolute no. The cross empowerment is not allowed at all. But in case of investigative action, that is search or seizure, the answer is yes. The cross empowerment is allowed. But multiple authorities, if entering to your premises for investigation, then the authority who has initiated will be the authority who will conclude, and not the authorities who have initiated later. So friends, this was all from my side, but yes, I would like to address few of the questions which I was supposed to address, or I was asked to address by Gauravji. So I would like to delve into that, and then I'll hand over to the managing committee. In next 7 minutes, I'll be taking the liberty of addressing further for 5 minutes, and then we'll take up the question and answers of the participants. First question that I was requested to answer is how to respond when audit showcause notice asks for voluminous data of GST returns which are already filed. Yes, I do agree with the bad approach of the officers. They keep on asking for such data which is already available with them. We have already filed electronically, manually, with whatever means it was supposed to be filed. We have already filed. They have all those data which is available with them, but still they forces us to file the data again. I would say and submit that being an honest taxpayer, this becomes our responsibility to respond back to the summons or the notices that we receive. If he's asking for something which is available to him, what we can do is we can write back to him that these data are already available with you. We can send the date on which those data were submitted, those returns were uploaded. And then we can conclude that letter that if at all you are again requiring that data from us, we'll be happy to provide that data. So initially, yes, you can write back to them that the data is already available with them, and we can show the resource, show the submission, when and where we have submitted, and then also we can be ready or we can be prepared for submitting those data again if he is further insisting for the same, because generally they insist for the same. They ask us to take a printout, submit those data or the returns which are already available with them with your physical signatures, which is absolutely not the intent of the law or not the intent of the GST lawmakers, but still the officers are following it and we'll have to live with it. Next question is very interesting. Whether assessee can deny providing books or records which are beyond accounts and records as mentioned in CGST Act or rules. See, CGST Act section 35 read with rules certainly provide for certain accounts and records to be maintained. We are bound to maintain such accounts and records, but generally, practically what we have seen, they will draw a Excel sheet and they will ask certain data to be provided in that format, and that format is what they are used to. See, generally we all live into our comfort zone, so the officers are also living in their comfort zone, and they will give us a abstract of an Excel wherein they will say कि आप अपना data इस तरीके से मुझे आप करके दीजिए. Rather, they will force us to calculate the interest also on our own. Question is whether we are bound to do that, wherein he is asking to provide something which is beyond the accounts and records to be maintained. The answer is absolute no. We are not bound to do that. But unfortunately, we all are aware, सब कुछ करें जयकांत शिकरे का ईगो हर्ट ना करें. That is the bad part, that is the sad part, but that is the fact. These officers are like, they behave like God, and they want us to worship them. Whatever, whether right or wrong, they are asking, they want us to comply with it. So my humble submission would be, if something is possible with little investment of time, because the stake involved of our clients is high and they can drag the client into further litigations or unnecessary litigations. If we are in a position to provide the data in their format or in their expected level, then yes, we should provide, although they cannot enforce or they cannot make us compel to submit those data which is not required as per the provisions of the law. Next question is, if audit SCN asks for fresh reports and data which has to be freshly prepared, vertical wise GP, which taxpayer does not have and has to prepare afresh, is he bound to make and provide? I have already dealt with this. He is not bound, but he is obliged, I would say, to provide it. Because मैंने बोला ना कि like they are God to us, they behave like God to us, and they want us to do everything that they are required to do over and above what we are required to do. So certainly we are not bound, but yes, we should provide so as to pamper their ego and get the matter adjudicated as per our wish and as per the legality. Otherwise, they can go to any level, even to the level of illegality, and they will harass the taxpayer. So to safeguard that, yes, we should provide, although we are not bound to provide. Under section 61, scrutiny of returns, what is the limit of data being asked by officer? It has seen in grab of such notices, officer is asking for everything. Yes, I do agree with this, and I've already mentioned this while deliberating that the broad power has been given for scrutiny of returns. See, technically scrutiny of returns is nothing but assimilation of whatever data has been submitted by various forms like GSTR 1, GSTR, originally it was GSTR 1, GSTR 2, GSTR 3, and then GSTR 3 was to be evaluated on the basis of all those returns which are filed by their recipients or their suppliers. So practically speaking, they should not ask, but they are empowered, because whenever we scrutinize something, we need to go into the base of it. Unless we go into the base of it, we'll not be able to scrutinize and reach to the conclusion which we are looking forward for. But the law says discrepancy. If you read section 61, I think it provides the term discrepancy. So if there is any discrepancy, they can ask for. But generally we have found that they go into the entire audit while scrutinizing the return, and therefore at the time of deliberation I've shared that now they have dual sword with them, dual sided sword with them. वो scrutiny भी कर सकते हैं और audit भी कर सकते हैं, या दोनों कर सकते हैं, and that is what they are pretending to do. So yes, under section 61, the restriction is for the discrepancies found while scrutinizing of the return. But yes, practically they are asking for everything. And again, the answer would be same. If we want to safeguard our client, and if it is possible, we should provide. If it is not possible, then certainly we should insist on not providing. DRC 01A becoming optional from mandatory, I don't think there is going to be any impact, because DRC 01A, many of the officers were not issuing on time, and there are n number of litigations which are pending before the authorities. And DRC 01A unfortunately is not giving any opportunity of being heard also. It is merely saying part A aap bhar dijiye, part A they will be giving to us, and they request for our reply in part B. Generally, I have observed they will never look into the part B replies which you have submitted. They will always go into DRC 1, which is copy paste of DRC 01A. So I don't think practically there will be any issue. Existing case laws jurisprudence to counter matters raised in SCN. Yes, depending on the matters, there are many cases which can be covered, and I will be requesting Goa branch to give me another opportunity of sharing such kind of cases and deliberating on that, so that I grab that opportunity and I share all those case laws which are certainly going to be helpful for replying back to the notices which are being issued to the taxpayers as of now. More specifically, when they are alleging the suppression, or they are when they are invoking the extended period of limitation. Circular notification section rule which specify proper officer and monetary limits of SCN. I have already covered that. Although I have not covered that Showcause notice, but that circular number. But yes, there are monetary limits, and the proper officer term is already defined. The commissioner or the officer to whom the right or the duty is being assigned. What precautions should be taken right now to ensure that allegations of fraud, willful misstatements, suppressions are not available to department under the GST regime? Gauravji, I am really sorry to say this. They will allege everything and anything to be falling within the purview of suppression, and looking to the definition which has been given by the tax statute of the term suppression in explanation 2 to section 74. It clearly shows that they are intending to cover everything under the definition of suppression. So it will be very difficult. Only the circumstances and our bona fide act or our submissions made earlier will be in a position to safeguard us, or to help us in defending our clients so far as this allegation is concerned. How an assessee can prove there is no fraud? No ways. वो बोलते हैं ना, हनुमान जी अपना सीना खोल के दिखाते हैं, भगवान राम उनके अंदर हैं. It's not possible for a taxpayer to prove that he is not indulged into any fraud. But yes, to be very honest, if honesty is there, if the fact is there, then certainly we'll be able to establish, if not before the appellate authorities of the department, if not before the adjudicating authorities, then certainly before the tribunals or the Supreme or the High Courts, because fraud needs to be proved, and allegement of fraud is by department. It is not by us. We are there to defend. And I have read every time, every now and then the person who is alleging needs to prove. Onus of proof lies on the person who is alleging, and I'm sure they are not having any base of proving all the activities to be fraud. Like a simple example which I have given, that I have procured certain goods. Now my supplier has run away. Maybe the reason is that he has run into losses because of this lockdown. This may be a genuine case. But now after 3 years, they have started evaluating and scrutinizing my returns, and now they are finding that person to be absconding. Now they allege that you have never received the goods because that person is not there, and they will drag me into the term fraud. But I will be very easily proving it that I am not indulged into fraud by ways and means. There will be a number of ways and means wherein I will be in a position to prove that there is no fraud. So yes, the assessee will not be in a easy situation to prove that there was no fraud, but if he is factually correct, then I am of the belief that certainly he will be getting out of this allegation, if not at the first stage or second stage of appeal, then at the second stage of appeal, or maybe before the appellate tribunal. Last very important question is there: is ignorance of law defense against fraud allegation? The answer is no. Ignorance of law is never an excuse. If I am saying that I have received the goods, but I have not managed or I have not maintained the documents which were supposed to be maintained so as to establish the receipt of the goods, like goods receipt register, the acknowledged part of that delivery challan, if I have not maintained those records, then it is my fault, and it may become difficult for me to defend my case against the allegation of fraud. And I cannot say that since I was ignorant, this allegation I am not able to defend. So as per me, the answer is no. With this, friends, these were my submissions on the topic which was given to me, assessment and adjudication proceedings under GST. I hand over to the managing committee, and I am thankful once again to the entire managing committee, to WRC, and all the participants who attended this. And I hope I have added some value to the participants and the knowledge that they were pertaining till date. At least one person has been added to their knowledge, and that will be more than sufficient for me. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Advocate C. Avinash. It was good learning. At the same time, it is scary situation, learning from all whatever you have shared. So there are some questions. I think there was one question, it was posted. Gaurav, if you can take a liberty to being your forte and raise if any other questions are there at your mind, I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Yes. So, sir, one question is received. Is Section 77 relevant now that PMT 09 is in place, where you can change the head of tax, especially before filing the return? Sir, I think you can take it.
Being a student of law, I will submit only one thing. Till the time it is the part of a statute, it is relevant. Procedurally, it may have found PMT 09 or whatever form, and we could get away with this. But still, since it is the statutory provision, I believe it is relevant. I'm not into compliance, so I'm not aware about PMT 09 what it is. But I am aware about one thing, that now IGST balance can be utilized for CGST or SGST. That liberty has been given to the taxpayer. But still, the provision of law is there, and it is relevant because there are earlier cases which would get settled in the future to come.
Sir, if I may add that what my understanding was, Section 77 was for specific cases where you have already paid the tax and filed the returns, and subsequently during the assessment or at a later stage you realize it was a wrong classification. Whereas
Correct.
PMT 09 was just wrong deposit of tax. किसी ने wrong head में डाल दिया cash ledger में.
Okay.
That is a much earlier level of.
So I would take a liberty to ask for an excuse because I'm not aware what is PMT 09.
Yes. Sure. I think there are no more questions as of now. Anything else, Mishra ji? और कुछ questions हैं?
नहीं sir.
No, doesn't look like.
I think sir has covered everything. So sir has put up a lot of food for thought for us, and we have to go back and question our clients now that have you done all of this. Otherwise, there will be further questions later on. So I think a lot of us are in that kind of mode right now. Thomas sir, you can please take over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gaurav. And we appreciate Avinash Poddar's this thing, and we will be happy to have you again. And we'll take the opportunity whenever we get you, and hopefully physically when the situation is improved. So we will be happy to have you. And from my side, I would like to thank my branch staff who had taken lots of effort to make this uh, program success. At the same time, the technical team of WRC was very supportive, and it was flawless, and we could conduct this webinar very well. And now I request immediate past chairman of Goa branch, CA Ullas Dumaskar, to propose give a concluding remark and propose formal vote of thanks. Over to you, sir. Unmute, sir. Please unmute, sir.
Thank you, Sir Thomas. Good afternoon, friends. I am privileged to be with you for the concluding remarks and vote of thanks for the first virtual sub-regional conference hosted by Goa branch and organized by WRC under the chairmanship of C. Lalit Bajaj and core team consisting of C. Vishal Doshi, C. Anand Jakotia, C. Murtuja Kanchwala, Goa branch nominee C. Sushruth Chitare, CCM Chandrasekhar Chitare, and technical team of WRC, especially Mr. Subhash Gurau and Mr. Vinay Mishra, for the smooth delivery of communication at our end during the conference. I thank the chief guest of this conference, Honorable Sri Sripad Naik, Union Minister of State for Ayush Independent Charge and Minister of State for Defence, New Delhi, for having accepted our invitation and gracing the occasion. I also thank the immediate past chairperson of WRC, C. Priti Savala, for being part of this conference. This conference was a fiesta for all of us in e-learning process with the combination of direct access in the field of real estate, faceless assessment, standard on auditing practices, and assessment and adjudication under GST. CA Dr. Girish Ahuja analyzed the issues relating to transactions of real estate with special reference to JDA and faceless assessment. CA Dr. Girish Ahuja, as usual, was far excellent. For new members, for getting themselves understand the concept of taxation and real estate, and for others to add to their knowledge. On practical aspects of standard on auditing, CA Dhananjay Gokhale and CA Niranjan Joshi did a marvelous job. CA Dhananjay analyzed SA 220, 230, 250 and all those, and CA Niranjan Joshi made us understand the standards on quality control. His detailed deliberation SREs, SAEs and SRS is superb and worth noting. Sir, the subject was not that boring for the participant as you anticipated yesterday while concluding your presentation. Thanks for your skill in presenting the same. In today's session, the presentation of Dr. Advocate C. Avinash Poddar was meticulously planned for the assessment procedures and on under GST. As regards adjudication under GST, the concurrence of the speaker with the opening remarks by say Manish Gadiaji is worth noting, as the future of profession will mainly be of litigation. The analysis of Showcause Notice is worth noting by we professional during our practice. I hope all the participants have gained in during of your talk. Sir, I thank all the speakers of this conference for having shared their expertise knowledge and for the benefit of we all participants. I express my sincere gratitude to all the speakers of this conference for having responded to Goa branch request without any reservation. I thank all the participants of this conference for having joined this e-learning event, which was par excellence. I also thank the back-end staff of WRC and the Goa branch for having made this conference a big success. I declare this sub-regional conference as closed with a remark that all is well that ends well. Thank you.
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll close this session now.
Yeah. Can go.